Welcome to Coffee and Conversation. My name is Honorine, and today I'm with Bobbie Renfro, who is pursuing a PhD in ecology and evolution. Bobbie, welcome, and thank you for being with me today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and talk a little bit about my research.
Yeah, so let's dig in. Can you start with introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Bobbie Renfro. I am originally from Austin, Texas, but moved here to go to FSU, specifically to study in the lab of Dr. Janie Wolf in our biology department. And our lab is all about sponges that live in marine habitats. Specifically, I'm really interested in the sponges that live on coral reefs because they serve all of these incredible roles on coral reefs that we don't think of. You think of the corals as being the big part of this ecosystem that we even see, on our daily news, things about the Great Barrier Reef corals. But the sponges are the glue that holds the reef together. They're the filter of the reef. So they keep the water that beautiful crystal clear blue that you think of when you think of healthy tropical water. They also are food for organisms like hawksbill sea turtles and angelfish that are some of the first things you think of when you think of the ocean. You think of things like sea turtles. And they serve as sort of a living hotel on the reef. So there's lots of other animals that live inside of the sponges and wouldn't have a habitat to live in if the sponges were gone from the reef.
Wow, that's fascinating. I didn't know that the sponges had so many roles. In which role do you study? Do you study all of them, or do you study the glue role, the food role, or the living hotel? I like this, living hotel.
Yeah, so I study their role as the water filter of the reef because I'm interested in how human created nutrient pollution, things like pollution from nutrients in fertilizers from our agriculture or our front yards, and things like nutrient pollution from sewage mismanagement, how those nutrients go from the land out into the ocean and what that does to the sponges on the reef. Because when you have high nutrients in an area that's not used to having high nutrients naturally, you get these blooms in the water of plankton. The sponges can filter the plankton out, so maybe they're the natural answer to this pollution, but also I often worry about them getting clogged as the filter of the reef. Maybe we're creating too much plankton and they're not able to filter that much out of the water. And it'd be the same thing as, the filter in a water fountain needing to be changed out, except we can't change the sponges out on the reef. If they're clogged, then they're going to die.
So you said that basically you pollute the water from your garden without maybe realizing it. So does it mean that anyone from their garden, or for instance, in Gainesville or I live in Gainesville, that's what I say, in Tallahassee, where you are 2 hours away from the sea, you're fine. But if you live in Destin, then you pollute. Or do you pollute as much wherever you live? Because in the end, pollution travel.
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. A lot of people think, oh, I'm far from the ocean. I'm not concerned about my effects on the ocean. But in areas like Florida, we have what's called a karst bedrock system. Essentially, our rock that is underneath all of the land we walk on looks like Swiss cheese made out of limestone. And it connects the entire state through water flowing underground that we don't even really perceive as flowing underneath us. So things that we do here in Tallahassee or that you're doing there in Gainesville, that's all connected to our marine resources because water travels both over the land through rivers and under the ground through the aquifer system and the bedrock out onto our marine habitats. So what we do here travels through the whole state and still ends up affecting our reef resources.
And what about people watching, I don't know, from Nebraska or from Wyoming, and they're like, I'm so far, I'm not concerned at all about this pollution. I'm good.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the things that I think about a lot is how connected humans are to the environment, that we're not a separate thing from the environment. We're just more animals living in it. And especially now with how our food is produced and how interconnected our communities are, not just across the United States, but across the world, where the fish you're eating, say in Nebraska, comes from, maybe the marine habitats that you think you have no effect on. And so for people like that, one, nutrient pollution actually travels a lot farther than we may think. Nutrients from the center of the United States travel through the Mississippi River and pollute the Gulf of Mexico. But also the power of, landlocked centralized states to still participate in voting for things that protect our marine resources does affect them too, because it's things like the fish you want to eat or the place that you're hoping to see on vacation that you're trying to protect, even if it's not right in your own backyard.
Oh, fascinating. And where does this interest in the coral reef ecosystem come from?
I kind of fell into it by accident. I was a student at the University of Texas as an undergraduate student, and I was studying biology, but I had planned to go to medical school. I thought that's what you did. If you're good at science and like talking to people and want to be helpful, you become a doctor. and so it was actually in my very last semester of my undergraduate education that I took a course in Mexico. It was a 1-month-long study abroad course on a coral reef. I honestly took it because I never thought I could afford study abroad. And then I found a scholarship to this specific class, and it filled one of my last biology requirements to graduate. So I thought, awesome, I finally get to go do study abroad. How cool. And I went down there, and seeing the coral reef ecosystem in person for the first time in my life was, you hate to say life-changing, it sounds so corny, but it really was life-changing. I changed my entire career path after that course. So I really now put a lot of my own effort into trying to get undergraduate students out in nature and into the ecosystems that we can study as biologists, because I think that interaction in person with ecosystems is what inspires people to keep going and make it the center of their career.
Talking about teaching, I emailed you last week to have a statement about your experience as a teacher. And what I loved about your statement is, you said what I love the most is to help students get over their fear of being in the water and all of that. Could you tell me more about it?
Yes, so I'm the graduate teaching assistant for our scientific diving program here at FSU, and we train both undergraduate students and graduate students in how to safely conduct research on scuba underwater in all sorts of environments, local springs, the Gulf of Mexico, local lakes, and those skills translate to being able to do underwater research anywhere in the world. And I think the biggest hurdles in the course are not that our students, can't learn the material. I mean, they have the ability to learn the science part, but the intimidation of working underwater, especially if you didn't get the privilege of growing up swimming or growing up scuba diving, that's the part that's really exciting for me, is getting to be there with people and talk them through the safety procedures and enter the water together and see that at first there are hurdles, but they're able to push through them because they have such a strong passion for marine and freshwater science that they want to do with the rest of their careers. And that moment when a student that was afraid to work in murky water is able to conduct surveys without fear and be successful, or a student that was afraid to work in the ocean because they grew up with these mythical fears of things like sharks, and we can persevere through those fears and end up doing really well doing underwater science is kind of the most exciting part for me.
So you've received multiple grants and fellowships for your research. Do you have any tips for graduate students who are in the process of applying to fellowships and grants?
Yes, I think my first biggest tip is to not fear rejection. There are so many people applying to grants. There's such deep competition that I often feel like you have to, especially early on in your career, apply to 10 grants in order to get one. And you have to really develop the, I think, sort of emotional skill set of receiving feedback, receiving rejection, and learning, okay, what was it about my application to this grant that they didn't find appealing, or they didn't answered something scientifically? How can I improve how I'm explaining my science? Or is there a piece of that my science is missing? Or is there a part of my writing skills that I need to develop? And growing from each grant application. I was not as successful at getting grants early on, and I think I have gotten so successful now over years of applying to grants and learning from each one of them. I think my other advice is to really know your audience. I go look at what the mission statements are of the places that I'm applying for funding, and I try to incorporate not only the language that they use in their mission statement into my applications, but I also think about how my science directly applies to their goals, because a lot of the science that we do is so broadly applicable. You just have to know how to explain why it's important to each new group of people. And so I think that communication practice is a really big thing for, I think, anyone in any field, but particularly in science. I think it used to be that there was such a strong focus on communicating like a scientist, and I've really tried to morph into communicating science so that anyone, whether or not you're a scientist, can understand it.
Wow, thank you so much for those advice, especially the rejection one, because this week I received my 6th rejection from dissertation fellowships that I've been applying to. And, you know, it was the last one that I applied, that I got the answer from. So all of them, I got rejected. And I was like, you know, why did I waste my time applying to all of those? I could have done something else. And so what you said, you know, just hit me right. Because in the end, it's true, you learn from the process. And I remember when I mean, not that I remember, I read it in my journal that I said, no matter what happened, it really helped my research and structure my research, and think through it, because as you said, you have to explain to an audience that most of the time is not familiar with exactly what you're studying. They're familiar with the field, but not exactly your topic. So you have to make your statements and you know, broad enough, but still specific. So it's true, you do learn, but it's tough. It's really tough to go through that rejection. And I mean, when we apply, we know it's super competitive, you know, 800 applicants, 10 recipients, but receiving all those rejections, they do hurt.
Yes, and I don't think they ever stop hurting. I think another thing that I try to do is tell my peers when I have been awarded something, but also when I got rejected, so that we create a community atmosphere of it's okay to be rejected from grant applications and or conferences or whatever it may be. That's just also a part of the sort of checks and balances of being at this level in the world of academia, is that we're constantly, you know, controlling for who's getting funded or who's getting to present, hopefully based on like ever increasing, trying to help each other grow and create better applications and better presentations. So I usually try to say like, oh yeah, I got rejected from this, but it's okay, on to the next one, so that hopefully someone else that's also gotten rejected can feel like we're in it together.
How do you see yourself in 5 years from today?
I see myself hopefully as a professor at an academic institution, although that was not always how I expected my career path to go. When I entered my PhD, I actually felt more drawn to government positions. I had a government position after undergrad as a biology intern, and it was just a really positive community environment working in a government biology facility. And it's also a very stable job and has really good benefits. And I think that all of that really appealed to me. And it wasn't until kind of going through my PhD and I think developing skills in things like grant writing, that I felt more confident that I also would enjoy being a professor. And I also, the teaching component, I would miss too deeply if I went and worked somewhere where I didn't get to have college students. So I'm really excited to equally split my time between teaching and research. And then also I'm hoping to maintain a pretty heavy component of outreach and restoration activities. I partner with a group called Isla Morada Conservation and Restoration Education, ICARE for short.
Okay.
And they're in the Keys, and they work with volunteer recreational scuba divers to do restoration of the coral reefs there. And that partnership has been one of the most rewarding things that I have sort of stumbled into by knowing the right people in the Keys and working down there for a long time. And that I've really appreciated that opportunity, and I want to maintain that sort of community engagement in science and restoration as well.
Wow, that's awesome. And the Keys are beautiful. So I guess it's a great place to work.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Bobbie. It was so great to know more about the coral reef ecosystems, because I see the beauty of it, but I didn't know all their roles and all you could do with them. So thank you for sharing your research with me today.
Thank you so much. I had a wonderful time chatting.